Hi, I'm Councillor Peter Carlisle. I'm one of the Deputy Chairs of the Transport Committee with responsibility for bus and active travel.
Miles Larrington, Committee Services Officer.
Councillor Nick Firth, Kirklees Councillor, and another one of the Deputy Chairs with responsibility for rail.
Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Sustainable Development and Infrastructure at Leeds City Council.
Liz Rowe, Councillor on Bradford Council.
Scott Patient, Cabinet Lead, Climate Action, Active Travel and Housing, Calderdale Council.
Councillor Colin Hutchinson, Calderdale's Transport Engagement Lead.
Councillor Axel Shaw, Portfolio Holder for Regeneration Plan and Transport on Bradford Council.
Councillor Matthew Morley, Cabinet Member Planning and Highways, Wakefield Council.
Councillor Moses Crook, Cabinet Member for Housing, Highways and Transport, Kirklees.
Kerry Peters, Regional Director for the East Region with Northern Trains.
Good morning, Brandon Jones from First Bus.
Morning everybody, Kim Kane, Area Director with Arriva.
Morning, it's George Thomas from Transport Express.
Morning everybody, Andrew McGuinness, CP2 Regional Manager representing all bus operators in West Yorkshire.
Good morning, Henri Roy, Managing Director of Transdev Blacefield.
Morning, Paul Taylor, Commercial Director, Transdev Blacefield.
Councillor Andrew Lloyd, Bradford Council.
Councillor Peter Caffrey, Calderdale Council.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Annie Maloney, Transport Engagement Lead at Leeds City Council.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Oliver Edwards, Leeds City Council.
Morning everyone, Councillor Matthew McLaughlin from the Corn Valley Ward in Kirklees.
I'm Caroline Firth, Councillor in Bradford.
Morning everyone, Helen Alton, Head of Transport Policy at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Morning everybody, Mick Bunting, Interim Director of Transport Operations and Service Transformation Combined Authority.
Good morning, Dave Haskins, Interim Director of Passenger Experience and Assets Combined Authority.
And I'm Simon Warburton, Executive Director for Transport.
Thank you very much. So obviously we've got councillors from across West Yorkshire here debating bus and rail and all those impacts on passenger transport across the region, and we're ably supported by officers of the Combined Authority here, and also today we have bus operators and rail operators who are in attendance for us to ask questions of them. So moving on now to the next item on the agenda then, we've got minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee held on 16th of November. Councillor Hutchinson, you rightly pointed out something here.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 3 it says that, following the consultation, and congratulations to those who contributed to the consultation on ticket office closures, but it does say that at the last meeting we determined that resolved that a letter would be sent to Rail North Partnership seeking further clarification on staffing levels and the provision of public facilities and how those would continue following the outcome of the consultation. I just wanted to seek assurance that that letter had gone and whether there has been a response to it.
Yes, I believe it did go, and we have had assurances. I've at least had verbal assurances that they're now going to start recruiting, because obviously there was a vacancy freeze, wasn't there, by the operators, and obviously they're in attendance and might be able to advise us. But Simon, do you want to, or Dave?
Algwyn, you're indeed correct that is the case, and it's referenced in the report as well around what the rail operators will be doing going forward in terms of the rail ticket office, and as I said, they're here today to be able to take those queries as we get to that point in the agenda.
Thank you, well spotted, Councillor Hutchinson. Any further comments, queries on the minutes of the last meeting? No. With that then, can I suggest there's a record as an attached record of that meeting? All those in favour please show. Thank you, that is carried. With the rest of the agenda, I propose changing the order of the agenda, because obviously we have guests here. So I'll move the rail strategy update, which is currently number 5, down to after number 7. So we'll go 6, 7, 5 and then 8, if that's okay with everybody. So we'll go first of all to passenger experience update. But before I do that, I'd just like to highlight the bus interchange update that has been distributed this morning to members. I'm hoping you've had a chance to have a read through this report. It is something that I requested combined authority officers to do to this meeting, because obviously it's been a massive inconvenience of Bradford bus interchange being closed quite suddenly, really, at Christmas time, and it's been very confusing for members of the travelling public, and as I say, hugely inconvenient to their journeys as they go around West Yorkshire. So it's such an important issue for Bradford and indeed for the combined authority that I wanted to bring it here so that members of the authority across West Yorkshire could ask questions of the officers about what the current state of play is and how quickly we can get to a more stable arrangement for the travelling public. So, Simon, did you want to just sort of start this and then we can ask questions as subsequent? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And as you rightly say, it's very much been the focus of the work of both myself and the team here since we returned from the Christmas break. But what I suggest is I'll just quickly guide members through the short note that we've circulated here, which of course we will subsequently publish as an appendix to the papers on the website. So we took the regrettable but necessary decision to close the bus facility at Bradford Interchange from the end of business on Thursday, the 4th of January. And that was following growing concerns that we had around the structure brought about by a combination of the adverse weather conditions that are underway and the ongoing work taking place within the facility. The short history to this is that on the 22nd of December, quite a sizable piece of concrete fell into the underground car park underneath the interchange, and I took the decision to close the car park in the first instance for public safety reasons, and we made the necessary alternative parking arrangements for users of the car park at that point. We then instigated further inspections, and within the capability of the team alone, we were unable to satisfy all of our concerns around the structure, and therefore, in the light of considering our public safety responsibilities, we decided to make sure that no members of the public could be placed into danger, and instigated an emergency operation. I'll come on to that in a moment. Members may well be aware of the fact that there has been work ongoing on the bus facility, a business case, £8.5 million business case for that work was approved by the Combined Authority in December 2021, and at that point was increased from an additional indicative budget of £2 million, which had been suggested at the start of the previous year, so that work could be undertaken to address the principal structure. The bus station is highly unusual in its nature, and has buses operating over an elevated area supported by a continuous concrete slab, and above a cavity which has served as the basement car park. We have instigated inspection work. We've appointed third parties to undertake the inspection work. That in itself is a challenging undertaking at this point because of the recent history in terms of rack inspections, meaning that that particular supply chain is very much stretched. I only make that reference to rack because of some of the challenges it's bringing for us in terms of timescales. I should stress that we had already undertaken a rack survey of the interchange, and we don't believe that rack is is the cause of the specific issue here. The initial inspection that we've had has confirmed to us verbally that we were right to take the decision that we took in the first instance, so that a full survey of what is in the order of an acre of continuous slab covered over time by various internal fittings and so forth can be undertaken. That is an inspection process that will take a matter of weeks, and that was the reason why on the 19th of January we issued further public information to confirm that the bus station will remain closed for at least the next 2 months, so as to allow time for all of that inspection work to take place and for me to be able to bring advice back. We have therefore had an emergency operation plan in place since the evening of the 4th of January. We do have emergency operating plans already agreed around each of our bus facilities, and our plan here has enabled us to temporarily operate the majority bus operations in the Hallings Nelson Street area, and we've supplemented that with the use of the Jacobswell car park, which is now operating as a temporary layover area, and there are a range of incremental improvements that we've made to information, pedestrian signage, and we've also had great support from our industry partners in that regard. So it's a testament that at 7 o'clock the next morning we had 16 members of combined authority staff there, but also significant numbers of bus operator staff, all working very flexibly with us to help to advise the public, and we're very grateful of that. Equally, we've had terrific support from colleagues in Northern Rail, who've now accommodated a temporary travel centre in the Northern Rail ticket office in the rail station, which again is hugely beneficial for passengers. We have a daily liaison arrangement in place with both bus operators and also council staff, and we've now moved to a 3 times a week stand-up call with bus operators, and all of the temporary operations has been overseen by Mick Bunting. And of course, what we now start to do is to turn our minds to what else can we continue to do to improve, and just through the last week we've put additional arrangements in place to make sure that local businesses can be best serviced while protecting passengers and so forth. And we're very clear that our objectives are as follows. So firstly, to protect public safety in the area. Secondly, to ensure that we can assist the council in managing traffic in the area, recognising the importance of us continuing to progress with the Transforming Cities Fund works that are underway in that area, and also the work to remove the former NCP car park on the corner of Hallings and Nelson Street. We are conscious of the potential for wider congestion impact in the city centre, and again working closely with council colleagues on that. And what we now look to do is to continue to develop a facility that can be best managed in the interests of passengers, operators and the city centre as a whole. The second key area of work has been around assets and estates. The interchange sits adjacent to a number of operating buildings, and we also have tenants who have been trading out of the interchange area. So we've looked to make sure that all of those interests are kept up to date on the operation and our anticipation in terms of any impact on business. And we are also, through that work, managing down for the time being the work that was previously underway on the interchange, and all of that work is being overseen by Dave Haskins and his team, including now the inspections work. We have looked to maintain regular communications, and Nick Appleyard, who heads our Combined Authority Communications team, has overseen that work, looking to stay closely with both the council and operators. We do recognise that there will be costs and impact associated with these arrangements, that there are lost revenues both to ourselves and also to the council, and clearly we recognise that there are third parties on our premises as well who will face issues in that regard. And so we are, and there will also be costs associated with the interim arrangements that we put in place, and also costs that may follow if there is any knock-on impact for the current contracts for other works in the city centre. But we are, as I stressed before, looking to manage those very closely. So we've established a mechanism to capture all of these costs. We will be noting in the budget report to the February Combined Authority that this will present an additional budget item for the Combined Authority budget, and then we will look to bring forward some form of initial estimate on that in an update report to the Combined Authority in March. Finally, all aspects of the operation, the engagement, are being overseen by a Gold Command arrangement that we've stepped up inside the organisation since the 4th of January. I chair that, and we're also I'm running a twice weekly Gold interface session with lead officers within the council. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. So this, obviously, I said in my opening remarks, is hugely inconvenient for people. I suppose from my point of view, first of all, what kind of measures are we putting in place to see what the customer experience is and how can improve it? Because obviously I'm getting messages from people on a daily basis saying, you know, when is it going to be sorted? How do I do X, Y and Z? And I want to have some kind of measure about how they're experiencing things as they go forward. Any improvements we need to make them quickly.
Sure, thanks, Chair. So we've got officers on the ground who are speaking to passengers at various stopping locations throughout the city. We are enhancing our offer in the rail station in terms of the temporary travel centre option that we've got there available for passengers. We continue to work with operators to ensure that the disruption plan is working, and that we're monitoring data and information about journeys to ensure that performance is where we need it to be. So we've got that constant interface with passengers. We are working closely with them, we are speaking with them, but completely understand that, particularly in the early stages of the disruption plan, where there was some confusion, as can be understood with passengers, that we needed more people on the ground to have that interface with them. We are finding, through anecdotal evidence from speaking to people, that they are now settled with the current arrangements, but that's not breeding any complacency from us. We're working on our next phase disruption plan that will work alongside officers of the council, that will allow us and the council to develop its TCF plans and the works in the city, so that we can work in harmony with that and with operators. So there is a large amount of work ongoing. We've also got our accessibility coordinator who's working closely on the ground to work with accessibility groups and speak with people who may have additional needs with their transport, and putting mitigations in place with those as well. We've got a health and safety team on the ground, and I've got a further meeting with my officers on Wednesday with a list of issues that have been identified to ensure that all mitigations are being and continue to be put in place to ensure that the passengers are safe, as well as accessibility issues are taken care of. So we're continuing to engage with the public, with operators and with council officers to ensure that everything that can be done is being done to ensure that passenger experience is as good as it can be.
So if we can have some kind of measure as we go on, so that we as politicians can just see how that is improving over time. That would give us some reassurance, I think. And obviously, people who are regular bus users may be getting used to things, but what about obviously new people as well? You might be trying the bus out for the first time. That's what we want people to do. Is it going to be more difficult for them to actually enter the bus market, if you like, because there isn't a central bus station for them anymore? And so the magic question is, how long is this disruption going to last, I suppose?
You'll probably be aware I can't answer that specific question, Councillor Hinchcliffe, but what I can say is that in terms of my element of the operational planning and the disruption plan around this, central to that is the passenger experience. So in terms of new people coming into the network and attracting people into public transport, now that we, as Simon said at the beginning, we're aware that we're staying at Jacobswell for the next 2 months and potentially beyond. We are now setting up a more permanent temporary fixture at the rail station in terms of the passenger information facility that we've got there. So we're doing everything we can to make it as easy as we can for passengers, and we've got people deployed around the city as well as around the interchange as well, and we'll continue to do so. And as our disruption plans change, we'll ensure that we enhance that offer on the ground. I've got a number of operational leads who I have daily contact with. I've got daily stand-up calls. One of those leads is about the resource planning, and his role is to ensure that the passenger needs are taken care of and that we've got the right people on the ground to deal with those issues. So I can give you that assurance at least.
The time is yet uncertain, is what you're saying. Other questions? Councillor Rushshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start, actually, thank your accessibility team who went on site after some concerns were raised about the routes as well, and they went on site really fast, so that was really appreciated. Just on the survey, I guess, and the length of time it'll take. So obviously we're saying 2 months, and it's close to 2 months, but presumably, and it's just about how we frame it to the public as well, but presumably that survey is not going to come back and say actually it was all right all along and you'll be able to reopen it. So there's an indeterminate amount of time after that where works, if possible, will have to be undertaken. And I obviously don't want you to make a comms announcement now, but I think it's important that we kind of acknowledge that, because if we're not careful, we're kind of saying, just as you did then, Jacobswell for 2 months. But in reality, if the survey is going to take 2 months, we can presume there's some significant works to follow. And I think part of the issue with the communications is the public are kind of sensing that. But because we're not kind of able, in part, to frame that appropriately, that's where people think something else is going on, and therefore we kind of want to avoid that. So I guess it's almost more of a comment than a question, because I know full well you won't be able to say, and we think it'll be this long after it, but it's just really to underline the importance of that framing, because when I speak to people, I say, well, we can all read between the lines and understand this could be a significant length of time, and everyone accepts that. But the conversations are starting from a place of frustration, a perceived lack of information because of the nature of how hard it is to provide that. Could you provide us a bit more information on the overlap with our Transforming Cities work in the city centre? Because that's obviously really vital as we go into City of Culture 2025. The timescales were tight already. And it's a really good scheme. It's going to deliver those good outcomes, but there's obviously a lot of interaction with the interchange in that, and it's mentioned a little bit in the report, but could you just provide a bit more detail on that, please?
Yeah, certainly. So colleagues may well want to add just on the issue of timescales. You're absolutely right, Councillor, that at this stage we don't know for certain the nature of works that will be needed to put whatever issues we find right. You're absolutely right to point that we need to plan for a series of scenarios, and that's precisely what we are doing now. So this 2 month period gives us the time to have set out very clearly between ourselves, the council officers, and also colleagues in bus companies, how we would respond to a series of different scenarios arising from the inspections programme. And we are very, very conscious of the fact that within that we now need to have options that we could genuinely mobilise that would safeguard the presentation of the city centre for Bradford 2025 should the inspection prove to demonstrate that there are very significant issues to be addressed. So that is very much the focus of the work now. In terms of transforming cities works on haulings, as things stand at present, the traffic management plans are such that the programme was looking to retain bus access through haulings, and therefore it coincides. What we want to make sure is that there's the right understanding of what's also needed at the same time in terms of the bringing down of the car park. So from a TCF perspective, I think we're comfortable with highways officers in the council that is manageable. We're making sure that we're absolutely right as well in terms of the removal of the structure, which of course is critical in terms of the presentation of the city centre.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back, I guess the key milestone is coming up in March when the bus changes come in all together. So that obviously will be a moving feast for now, but that's the key thing I think we'll all be aiming to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw. Any more questions or comments from people? Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is more about people. So, in terms of Bradford Council officers, how many officers have been taken from their role at the moment within the council, particularly thinking about wardens, etc. What is the plan for the combined authority to redeploy WICA staff to cover those roles so that wardens aren't taken away from their role for 2 months in what is one of the most highly populated and busy wards in the district?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a good question. So we are working very closely, as Simon said, we've got an interface with our Gold Command team between ourselves and senior Bradford Council colleagues, and this is one of the resource planning is a standard agenda item on there, so it's something that we are mindful of, and we've also got operational teams who are working together to ensure that workloads are managed, monitored, and that we look at the longer term going forward. In terms of, again, linking into Councillor Ross-Shaw's point as well, in terms of the future planning from an operational side, understanding that we don't know the long-term prognosis on the situation, there's a number of scenarios that we're planning for so that any eventuality is covered, and one of those key areas in that operational planning is about resources. So I can't give you a specific view on what that's going to look like going forward, but we are working really closely with the council and understanding that we need to balance the pull on their resources with their other statutory and other functions within the council, and it is a key part of our resource planning in both the operational elements and the Gold Command. So it is being looked at.
So how many Bradford Council staff have been taken away on a daily basis to be around the city centre and helping people to navigate?
I think if I could come back to you with a specific number, I think it's difficult to give a specific number because we're using and we're working with Bradford colleagues for different things at different times. So to give a specific number of staff that are fully deployed to this and to answer that question with any degree of accuracy, if I can go back to colleagues and get that information for you, that would perhaps be the most prudent way of answering that one. Thank you.
I think that would be key for members in Bradford to be kept up to date on that, because it is a question that's going to be asked and it has a massive impact on resource potentially.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. I mean, I think it's a good point to say, actually, if it is going to go on for a length of time, then those staff need to be backfilled. We can't just take them off from their duties, without backfilling those staff, because there is ongoing lots of work for wardens to do across the district, and obviously in City Ward, as Councillor Firth said. So that is something that needs looking at, actually, just to support those people. Any more comments or questions on this item? No, I mean, this is obviously going to be something that comes back on a regular basis now, because obviously this is a combined authority asset that is going to need a significant amount of investment. It is significant disruption for Bradford. There's significant ongoing people costs to make sure that, other Bradford Council responsibilities are not diverted from to support this work. So let's keep revisiting this and make sure that there's a solution to it. But of course, we're just a bit of a plea on the communications, that we communicate regularly, as Councillor Rush-Shaw says, we need to be really, you know, ongoing. Even if there's nothing to say, we need to say there's no update this week kind of thing. So there probably needs to be a regular notes on the Combined Authority website or through bus timetable channels to say this is what's happening this week, and a bit of a feedback loop to us so we can actually make sure people are comfortable navigating the way around Bradford City Centre and getting onto buses. And if there's any learnings we can take as we go on, let's take those and implement change. So let's just make sure that happens. Thank you very much. So moving on now then to the rest of the report, which is also passenger experience update. We do have bus operators here and train operators. They've already introduced themselves at the start of the meeting. Thank you very much for coming today. I think we should probably put it in two halves, do bus first and then rail, if that's all right. If we want to start with the bus operation update from a passenger experience point of view, Dave, do you want to?
I'll certainly do that. I'll give a very brief overview. It's quite a long report, probably a bit less dramatic than what we've just been hearing about, but no less important as it relates to the passenger experience out there in West Yorkshire. So starting with the bus, some key points in the report. Weekday bus use in West Yorkshire, 87% of baseline now compared to pre-pandemic, and at weekends it's up to 89%. That compares to 82% last year, so we're seeing some steady growth over that period, and indeed park and ride sites are at 81%, so there is improvement overall. In terms of service changes, we've already referenced the work that's been going on in Bradford, and there's a link at 2.9 to a full details of all bus service changes across West Yorkshire. Moving on to the bus network performance, obviously we have the bus operators in the room who will be able to answer questions around these points. But set out in the table below 211 sets out going back to this period between July and September, bearing in mind there may be some more recent information now available. Reliability and punctuality figures are falling lower than the expectation in terms of what we're expecting. We're expecting reliability to be at 99.5 and punctuality 95. Also notable is the drop in punctuality between August and September down to below 80% there. So it's quite a significant change over the full period. Moving on to real-time information, members will be aware we've previously given updates on the real-time information system, and in particular what we often refer to as the ghost bus problem, where passengers are standing at bus stops and not getting the information they feel they're getting. We've undertaken quite a bit of work over the last number of months, working very closely with bus operators to understand what the primary causes are and looking at some solutions as part of that. There are still some issues around ghost buses which relate to the recording of cancellations of buses in a timely manner. Obviously, if buses aren't cancelled on the system, they then still show up on street for people, and that's at the root of some of the problems. This has improved over time, it's pleasing to say, and I think some of that is a result of the close partnership working that's taken place there. We also identified some system issues which can improve on the technology side, so we're confident there'll be some quite significant improvements over time around the real-time information system. Moving on to the, in terms of what we call fare and pricing, what I'll do here is I'll bring in a little bit of information in from the following report, which is the BSIP Bus Service Improvement Plan report, where it references the Mayor's fares. In particular, we'll start off with a very brief overview from Andrew, because some survey work's been undertaken with passengers to understand the benefits of Mayor's fares. And then once Andrew's introduced that bit, I'll go on to talk about what changes have had to be made to fares and pricing in general and about to come into play.
Hi, good morning everyone. Andrew Fitzpatrick from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So I manage the research and spatial intelligence team here. So we've used an online panel survey. I'm going to share my screen to share some results. These are in item number 7, appendix 2. So I'm just going to whiz through these if that's okay. So I'm just going to use the same slides that are on there. So we used an online panel in October to assess the impact of Mayor's Fare. So there's 3 reasons for doing this. 1, it provides kind of local evidence. 2, we've got nothing in the patronage data that specifically attributes the impact of Mayor's Fares to the patronage change. So there's that disentanglement element of the COVID recovery versus the impact of the fares initiative. And we want to explore people's perceptions about the impact on the kind of cost of living crisis. I'm not going to go through all the slides, apologies if I'm speaking quickly, that they are in the pack. But first off, we asked about awareness So you see on screen on the pack that we've got the majority of people saying that they are aware, and this rises to 78% for regular users. Regular users uses the BSIP definition of those people who use the bus at least once a week. So a good amount of people who are aware. Note that just over a third of people who basically never use the bus are still aware of the intervention. So here we asked whether people had increased their bus use versus before Mayor's Fairs. That was before September 2022, and this is across the whole sample of 1,000 people. I should say this is 19 to 65-year-olds. This is turn up and go fare-paying passengers, and it is weighted by age, gender, district and ethnicity to be representative, to be a representative sample. So here we see that when we ask people whether they were using the bus more or less, so we've got 25% people who are saying they're using the bus more than before September last year. So you see that's a net gain versus the proportion you said that they're using it less. When we explore that in a little bit more detail, we then ask those 25% of the sample whether that was because of the fare cap initiative, and 67%, so 2/3 of those people said that they were using the bus more because of Mayor's Fairs. And what you see on the right-hand side is we asked people how they were making those journeys before Mayor's Fairs to look at whether there had been mode shift, whether there was new journeys, and you can see there has been a shift, at least self-reported, from particularly passengers using the car, younger people using the car, using Mayor's Fairs. I should say that actually that figure kind of rises depending on a couple of kind of demographic attributes. So younger people are using the bus more, or they're saying they're using the bus more because of Mayor's Fairs. People of particular ethnicities, so particularly Black British, Caribbean, African backgrounds, are using the bus more because of Mayor's Fairs. And I should also say that regular users, people who are already using the bus quite a bit, at least once a week, are using the bus more. So it's not necessarily you've introduced lots of new people, people are basically using the bus more. I won't go through all of these, but there is a degree of the people who are using the bus the same amount. We pose to them the same question, whether they're using the same, whether they're using the bus the same amount as before Mayor's Fairs, whether that, whether that had influenced their decision. So you see on here, so 38% of the almost half of the overall respondents said they were using the bus the same amount, have attributed that to the to Mayor's Fairs. So it's essentially a retention element here too. We asked about bus use for those people the 19% who are using the bus less, and the majority of this came down to kind of personal circumstances. There is a certain proportion who do state they're using the bus less often because of reliability and punctuality issues, but the majority of them are a change in personal circumstances. If we combine that data together, what we can say is out of the whole sample, so just over 1,000 people, we can say that 35% of those are either, number one, using the bus more because of Mayor's Fairs, or have retained in terms of being a customer on the bus because of Mayor's Fairs. Finally, we asked them a series of questions about the potential impact, particularly in light of the cost of living crisis in relation to Mayor's Fairs. So you can see there kind of a positive suite of results. We've got over half of people saying that it makes them easier to use the bus. Over half of people agree that the Mayor's Fairs makes it easier for them to get around West Yorkshire. 60% agreeing that makes it easier for them to make multiple journeys on the same day, and a good percentage of people who would recommend using the bus because of the fare cap. Finally, last point is this research that we've done here sits alongside a wider suite of research. DFT are doing their own research. Transport Focus have done two waves of survey work. We have our own annual public perceptions of transport survey too, which asks about confidence buying the best value ticket that I shared with you last year. I intend to do the same again this year. And finally, we are commissioning a wider piece of work on fares and ticketing in general, where we will revisit some of these questions so we can see the change through time. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
That's okay. What I'll do is I'll pick up on the remainder of there's only a little bit more to go around the bus side, and then we'll get on to the operators and questions. So linked to what Andrew's just said, obviously some very positive feedback around Mayor's Fairs and the perception of Mayor's Fairs and the use of bus as a result of that. In the report here, the key thing for me is that the Mayor's Fairs was originally set up, and it was due to have inflationary impacts built into the cost increases which were to come in at the end of year one. We did hold, or the fairs were held in September, mainly on account of the fact that the government then introduced the national £2 fare scheme, and it was our intention, and it remains our intention, to remain in line with the national fare of £2 as the government has set in that scheme, which we are not part of. Mayor's Fairs has been paid out of the BSIP, as we've referenced already. So as a result of not being able to increase the fares, there were some unexpected pressures that came in terms of Mayor's Fairs. And as a result of that, we will be moving to increase the £4.50 fare to £5 from the beginning of March. Now, this brings us in line with Manchester and is still lower than the Liverpool fare that they have operating at the moment as well. And overall, when we look at the fares increase on Mayor's Fairs and the other ones, which I'll just talk about in a minute, the overall increase in the average fare across the whole network to bus passengers, because we're holding the £2 fare, is in the order of 2 to 3%. So it's much lower than many people might have expected in this period of cost of living crisis. There are some other fares increases being brought in through the West Yorkshire Ticketing Company Limited, which is a separate entity to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. This is to deal with a range of products where fares have been held over time. So, for instance, the under-19 fares have been frozen for about the last 3 years now. So there is a level of catch-up that has been required in terms of placing those products within the overall framework of what our pricing is across tickets. They're the key elements that I wanted to bring about here. It is key to remember that this is a long-term programme we've got around Mayor's Fairs. We need to be using the BSIP, some of the BSIP money that government are giving us for 24-25 to effectively assist in contributing to longevity of Mayor's Fairs as a result of us holding the fares as low as we possibly can over this period of time.
Thank you very much for that. And obviously, Mayor's Fairs have had a great impact on that £2 fare, hasn't it, over time? And often we get asked, oh, it's great that the government has extended this, but actually, because the Mayor was first in the country for putting the £2 Mayor's Fares in, then it is actually BSIP money that pays for that rather than national government. But great that can continue, not just for the passenger uplift, but of course for the cost of living crisis, because people are really still struggling. And therefore it's great that they can travel for less and get connected to work and leisure opportunities for less. Councillor Cowler, did you want to come in first of all on that?
No, I'm fine. No, I think obviously that comes into the next report anyway around the Mayor's Fairs bit and keeping that going, but that's guaranteed now till March 2025. What we've been trying to get some clarification on is what might happen with the government scheme around the national fares, because we don't know whether at some point that was originally supposed to go up to £2.50 at some point. We haven't had any answer on that, so I think it'll be clear to get that answer to see then what other areas decide to do with those funds.
Thank you very much. So questions on buses, I think. Obviously passenger experience is something that we all hear a lot from for our constituents, and we have the bus operators with us today. Thank you very much for coming here today. Has anybody got any questions for our colleagues? Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. And can I pass on the apologies of Councillor Patient, who's had to leave to deal with an incident at school. As we've seen, the figures for reliability and punctuality are going in the wrong direction, and certainly the ones that have been presented to us. And we have heard from the report that's just been given that does play a role in people deciding not to use the bus services any more than they absolutely have to. And against that, it's disappointing to see with the recently announced changes to timetables, further cuts to the frequency of services on the core network in Calderdale, from Halifax to Bradford, going down in the evening, going down from hourly to 2 hourly, from Halifax to Leeds, going down from half hourly to hourly, from Halifax to Hebden Bridge, going down from half hourly to hourly. And when that's combined with poor reliability, if your hourly bus service is cancelled, then it means there's 2 hours to have to wait. And it's even worse, obviously, if it's 2 hourly. So I really am very disappointed that such severe cuts to frequency are still having to be applied on what has been determined as our core network.
So is that a question to First Bus, is it?
It's First Bus, yes.
Brandon, I'm not sure if you remember that particular service, obviously from Halifax, Calderdale point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's a few points here that I'd like to pick up. First of all, ourselves and I'm sure like other operators constantly work really closely with both the local authority and the combined authority to improve reliability and punctuality. And actually, I fully accept there's much more work for us to do. But when we look at that trend, particularly when we look at the period up to Christmas last year, there's been significant improvements in reliability and punctuality. Now, some of that is driven by the fact that we've worked very hard to retain and recruit staff, whether that be through salary, through terms and conditions. We are starting a driver apprenticeship scheme next week, which we'll be launching during apprenticeship week. We've also signed up to real living wage from April, so there's a lot of work going on in terms of our staffing position, and that is showing in terms of the statistics and the data that there is some improvement there, certainly compared to last year. Punctuality-wise, which is more affected by things like traffic congestion, we are making regular adjustments to timetables. Now, I do appreciate in some cases where that demand and that capacity is required, we are putting extra resources in. And certainly the changes that we introduced last December is certainly showing some strong punctuality improvements. On the other side of that, we have to react to traffic conditions. And just taking Bradford as an example, we've put 8 extra buses into that network just in the last few months to be able to manage and maintain that service network. So there is resource going into the network where that capacity and demand allows. I appreciate where those corridors are, the demand is less. We have to make adjustments and optimise our network to where the resources and where the demand is needed. So we do recognise that some of those changes are necessary, but where we can see growth, we are putting that growth in. And we are, as an operator, very much focused on a growth network now, but also a reliable network. And those timetable changes that we have announced recently and putting more changes in February is very much about being data-led. So trying to improve that punctuality and reliability so that our timetables match the conditions on the road. So I can go away and look at some of those specific details and look at some of our plans ahead, Councillor, in terms of specific corridors. But this is very much a data-led approach that is putting resources back into the network where we can see growth and demand, but also trying to put in place a timetable that's reliable for the customer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchinson. I've got Andrew McGuinness who'd like to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I can't answer to specifics because I represent the operators collectively. I'm not an operator myself, but in terms of generally, of course, operators have no direct control over the highway network. Clearly, that's down to local authority. So there's 3 main areas which can disrupt and can affect reliability and punctuality. One is there's a large number of major schemes across West Yorkshire generally, and again that's a positive thing. That's both road schemes and good for economic impact for West Yorkshire. That's positive. Of course, you don't make an omelette without breaking an egg, unfortunately. That can bring disruption. There's congestion at peak times, which I'm sure we'll be aware of. But also live disruption, so things like roadworks, things like disruptions, and there is places where the strategic road network can also impact on the local network. So there is challenges there. There is areas where we can be better, and for example, live issues such as the coordination of roadworks is one of them. I believe local authority colleagues will sometimes share the frustrations on statutory undertakers, and sometimes roadworks can be badly coordinated. There's an interesting stat I've seen in Manchester. Unfortunately, I don't have the specific stat for West Yorkshire yet, but I'll take an action to obtain that. But we had a stat on an average journey times in Greater Manchester which our chief executive articulated at a conference in Manchester last year, and that was the decline of average bus journey speeds over the last 30 years. And what that means is the slower buses are then clearly bus operators are then having to adapt to that environment. Brandon said 8 vehicles in Bradford, and talking to operators on the way, and I think a conservative number post-COVID would be 20 vehicles across West Yorkshire to deal purely with traffic and live conditions. And that obviously affects the economic performance of services, because you don't ultimately have automatically another 20 passengers proportionate to another 20 vehicles in there. If anything, as you're saying, Councillor, if there's reliability challenges, if anything, you're losing customers. So I would always consistently issue the challenge that we need to do more collectively on the highway network. I do appreciate we have a finite road space. We can't just build roads. We don't have flying buses, unfortunately. But I'd always challenge what we can do more. And I think we would always value your challenge to your authorities. I think we'd always value your partnership work on whatever's possible there. But bus operators have to operate the live challenges of the highway network, which I think is probably one of the biggest challenges, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, obviously we can always improve, can't we, on coordination, but I think we all have to recognise that we're always going to have roadworks. You know, Yorkshire Water might have a burst main, Northern Gas Networks might need to get back to a pipe that's not performing, so that's always going to happen. So we're always going to have roadworks, and that is just part of day-to-day business and making sure we manage those as effectively as possible. Councillor Edwards, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. I would welcome some of the data about the Mayor's fares and the impact. And one of the points that I saw was that, giving an example, the number 60, there was an increase in services and there was also an increase in patronage, which I think demonstrates that if you put the services on and if they run on time, people will use them, but we need those services. However, I wanted to pick up on the point about ghost buses, which is a big issue in the area that I represent, and it's an issue in many wards, especially outside of the city centres, and it's still happening. And it was talking about the report talked about bus operators not reporting these in a timely manner. So I'd like to ask each of the operators here today, will you commit to any cancellations being reported immediately? As soon as people in the depot know that that cancellation is happening, it needs to be reported immediately. And if it's not reported, whichever member of staff it is whose job it is to do that, there need to be consequences. Because in areas like mine and other areas, that can be very serious for people if they don't know whether the bus is coming, and that is on you, and that is something that you can do. So can we have that commitment around ghost buses? Also in terms of accountability, Andrew, you talked about partnership work, and I agree, that's what we would all want. However, for that to work, we need to know that we're getting data from the bus companies, and we also need to have that partnership. I'm pleased to see that Transdev are here today, because in all the time that I've been on this committee, it's the first time we've had you here. It's good to see 2 of you, in fact. However, my ward has 3 services, the A1, the A2, the A3. These provide a crucial connection between Bradford and Leeds to the airport, but they're essential for people who are working in the area. They're essential to visitors. I've contacted Transdev on a number of occasions through different means, and I've never received a response to any of my emails, any of my attempts. Can I put it to you that that is not a spirit of partnership? That's not a good spirit of good partnership work, and it's completely unacceptable when, as a company, you are receiving significant amounts of public subsidy. So I would like a commitment to better partnership work from Transdev, and particularly around some of the airport services, including the A1, where there have been a number of cuts or changes. And first, as well, I have had contact with First and Brandon. I know we've met before, and your colleague Kaylee, and that's welcome. However, when we've asked for bus performance data, we've either been told that it will be provided, but several months later, we're still waiting for that, or we've been told that it can't be shared because of commercial sensitivity. Commercial sensitivity on routes where there is only one bus, which is which is quite a lot of my ward and other outer areas. What commercial sensitivity is it if there is no competition on that route, and there's not likely to be any competition anytime soon? So can we have a commitment from First to share that bus performance data with us as elected members in a prompt and timely manner? I'm talking a week or a matter of weeks, not months, because again, we are here to represent our communities, and it's simply unacceptable to be waiting and waiting and waiting and for this information not to be provided. So ghost buses and bus performance accountability. Thank you.
So, Andrew, would you like to, on the ghost buses, is that something you can respond to, and then go to the Transdev and First Bus to address council?
Not from me directly. I think that would be one for the operators to answer more specifically.
Okay, well, we'll go for Transdev. Transdev, do you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And in terms of attendance here, we bought two to make up for the past, I presume, but actually this is the first time in 5 years of, well, actually more, probably nearly 10 years of working in West Yorkshire that I've been invited to the Transport Committee. So it's very nice to be here and have this opportunity to engage. In terms of ghost buses, I think we do pretty well at getting our cancellations up to date on the web. Unfortunately, there will always be instances in a high pressure situation where you pretty well break down on the road, that notification may take a little while to filter through, and we certainly aren't perfect at doing it, but rest assured we do keep on top of that and ensure that we are getting the processes right behind it. We've also got a couple of system changes coming up with that will tie in the feed for cancellations through into all downstream systems. At the moment, we have to cancel it, would you believe, 3 different times in 3 different systems because the systems don't always talk to each other. But thankfully, that will be resolved by April when we get an upgrade to the system to do that. And therefore, just cancelling it once in our back office will remove the risk of an error coming into there. So yes, that should resolve that. In terms of communication, first of all, sorry if we haven't got back to you. I do personally think I've had a correspondence with you, so I'll drop you a line after this meeting, and perhaps if you could share some of the correspondence you've had, then I could investigate on your behalf. But correspondence you have sent, then I could at least trace what's happened to that and make sure you've got the right conversation. I know from my regular conversations with Councillor Carlisle as well that there's been a couple of instances where things have been fed back to him that he's not, councillor colleagues haven't had a response from. So let us investigate that for you, because that's not something we would normally do on there. And more than happy to have a discussion with you about the A1, A2 and A3 going forward. Hopefully that covered everything you asked of us, but I suspect, judging by your face, you maybe not. So if you can remind me of anything else I need to comment on.
So specifically about accountability and who we contact at Transdev, can you clarify for all of us, because I know there are a number of members around here whose wards are served by Transdev services. Who do we contact, and can that information be shared with us and also with our constituents as well? Because at the moment, people send in a comment, members of the public send in a comment, it goes into this vast black hole, this customer service black hole, and nobody knows what happens next. So can we have some specific addresses or some specific contact details for members of the public and also for us as elected members?
I can provide that through the through Wicker, so we can get that circulated to all members rather than expect you all to write it down now. That's no problem. More than happy to update you all on that.
It sounds to me like you need to have a look at customer service and how that's working behind the scenes. There's obviously something not quite working there. First bus, Brandon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the questions. If I could just very briefly pick up on the ghost bus issue. I think my first point is, as you see in the papers, there's a working group established through the Combined Authority now, and actually that is a really good platform to share, you know, where we are. There are some challenges around data flow, around some technology, around some systems. But I can assure you, as an operator working with the Combined Authority, it is a focus for us. We are very aware of those issues that occur for customers. The vast majority of the time, it works well. There are times when it doesn't work well, which is really inconvenient and causes a lot of challenges for our customers. We understand that, and there are 4 key areas we're working on really. One of them is around software and the way that our systems analyse that data and how they then turn that into outputs for customers. And there are some changes that we've made at the end of last year, which is starting to see some improvements. It's not just one solution. The second, as you point out, is around how our staff manually intervene and make those cancellations occur. And you're right, there have been occasions for various reasons when we've not been as good as we could have been in doing that. We've put a lot of work in terms of both training and resource to improve that process. There are still times of the day and days of the week when there are a significant amount of issues that are occurring on a network that mean it's quite difficult to prioritise that when there are some other priorities. But we need to manage that more effectively and as effectively as we can. But there has been a lot of work going into that, and we are starting to see improvements on the ground. One of the things we're trialling in another location actually, but across our UK bus network, is something called automatic cancellation. So the manual intervention is required less, but our systems can automatically process that through to give our customers a better solution. So as that trial follows on, we'll be able to see if we can replicate that across our networks. And the last one is just the network technology. So updating our ticket machines with 4G technology rather than some of the 3G technology that have been currently used on there. So there's quite a lot of work going on, and it is improving, but as you rightly say, there's a continued focus from the operator side to make sure that there's sufficient resource to do that manual intervention, and that is happening. In terms of data, we do provide a lot of data through the Combined Authority already, and we have had conversations around opening that up, particularly around where the congestion hotspots are around our network, so that we can work closely with the authorities to target interventions. I think as a general principle, we are keen to share that data. I need to have a look at what the specifics were that you asked about to be able to then share that, because clearly if you're asking it in respect of one ward, then I think we need to look at how we would share, you know, certain amounts of data more across the network, and perhaps that's a conversation we need to have with the Combined Authority about how we do that. But in principle, we want to share data because we want to share performance with customers and with stakeholders, so that we can share where the challenges are as well as where the benefits are.
Lovely, thank you very much. I want to bring Councillor Carlin at this point, just about the ghost bus thing, and I think there's something wider here about customer experience and the passenger charter, isn't it, we were talking about just then? That I've had this again and again, that people don't get their emails responded to, and I do think there's something for us to look at there, because if the services from the operators are not responding, then how do we ever learn as a whole system? And therefore I would like us to look at that, perhaps do something about the passenger charter and see how operators are performing against that at the next meeting. I think that's perhaps something to do. But Councillor Carroll, you wanted to come in on the ghost bus?
Yeah, I can do, because obviously we've reported, I think, at the last few of the transport committees around this working group that's been set up, and that's looked at a number of the issues around ghost buses. I think at first it wasn't clear, in fact, where all of the the issues were coming up and where the most significant problem was. There's been a few data problems that have been put right. There've been a few different changes in process, but I think, as it shows in this report, that the main one we're seeing is buses not being effectively cancelled, so that it still shows on the screen, and that is a requirement on operators. I know that in most cases that needs to be done manually, and that's a problem, but operators have got a position in to do that. But we've seen huge fluctuations at times, I think, in the processes that operators have, and then the number that are cancelled, to the point where there's no static figure, and that shows you that some periods of time, maybe when everything's going smoothly, then everything is cancelled as it should be, because there's enough time in the depot to do that. At times when the network is hit hard by reliability problems, perhaps, then things aren't being cancelled as they should, perhaps because, quite rightly, the staff in the depot have a lot of other things to do to make sure they're dealing with the problems of not having enough drivers, or you know, what bus is going out. But unfortunately, at that, the one thing that does seem to miss off at that point is cancelling that bus on the system if it's not going to be run as soon as we know. And that's why sometimes, unfortunately, that somebody is waiting for a bus that somebody knew wasn't coming. In terms of the part about passenger experience, I wonder if Mick's able to just remind us a bit of the detail of what's in there, because that's something that came to this committee very recently, isn't it, to sign off, just in terms of the responses.
Thanks, Councillor Carlow. Yes, I think my recollection is that the passenger charter was launched in March 2023 through this committee, and one of the key elements of that was about customer complaints and passenger feedback mechanism, and the difficulty we had at the time in centralising that, and perhaps is reason for some of the comments that have been made today about that. I've just been on to the colleague who leads on that piece of work, and we've asked that in addition to the report, to the charter, when it's relaunched in April 2024 on its first anniversary, will be a list of KPIs that show performance, but also to revisit the customer feedback mechanism to see if that's working, what the effectiveness is, and look at the data through that, and to work with operators to bring a refreshed passenger charter to be launched early this year. But in response to your comments, Chair, we can get something in the next Transport Committee that give you an interim update on that position. Yeah.
Thank you. I also don't want to wait till April to make improvements, so if things aren't working, let's sort it now. Any more questions or comments on the bus operators, or do we move on to rail? I'm not seeing any hands indicating at the moment, so if we move on to the rail element then, is that you again, Dave?
That's me again. I'll talk through briefly, mindful of time here. In terms of the rail side of things, as opposed to bus, where we do tend to relate the passenger levels back to pre-pandemic levels, rail companies Northern Transpennine now moved to a year-on-year reporting, just to be mindful of that. So Northern's relating to an 8% increase November to November, commuter levels remaining stable, but leisure is an important market. And TPE's got 33% increase compared to that time, but actually there were, you know, a high level of exceptionally high level of cancellation during that period, and demand at this time at the previous time that year. I won't go into too much detail around that, but if you look at the rail network service changes, I think you'll recall with a number of discussions at the last Transport Committee about the new winter timetable coming in on the 10th of December. There were some concerns and issues around, or concerns, should I say, around the impacts that would have Northern trains, with some reduction in the lengthening of trains and a couple of lines there. And also with Transpennine, with the introduction of the Nova 3. And again, my understanding is that the rail operators who are here today have some updates on some of those issues, which they'll be able to give us if we so wish to in the meeting as well. In terms of network performance and reliability, I think it's fair to say there have been some big challenges in this area, notwithstanding the fact that the operators may wish to update on the figures we've got here. There's been a significant decline in punctuality from both Northern and TPE, and cancellations from Northern have increased, and TPEs have also increased, but not to the high levels they were previously experiencing. So there's some areas of concern there around performance, I think it's fair to say, overall. Of course, there has been some issues within that around availability of rest day working and the weather and network rail attributable instance. So rail performance isn't necessarily just solely a function of the rail operators. Network rail do come into this equation at all. It has to be remembered. I touched on the TPE and the rest day working. I'll pick up very briefly on a couple of other aspects. Rail strikes, there's a brief bit of text in here on rail strikes. As you know, we're in a period of rail strikes at the moment between 29th of January, which is today, up to the 6th of February. There's expected to be some additional disruption on lines due to the ASLEV overtime ban. Specifically, this Wednesday, 31st of January, there's a rail strike where there'll be no or very limited services in here. I think no services actually is the case to mention. There's a section here around upgrades on Transpennine, activity on Transpennine route upgrade. We have some active groups that work on this and work closely to make sure that this information is communicated clearly to members, because there's going to be a significant disruption coming up over quite a substantial period of time, which we shouldn't lose sight of. The final couple of things to mention, I think Councillor Hutchinson quite rightly mentioned before around the closure of rail ticket offices and the consultation that took place around that. We have been in discussion with the rail operators around what measures they're taking to fill the posts, because of course there were some recruitment freezes in place at the point at which the consultation was ongoing. And again, we have the operators in the room who may wish to comment on that. And finally, although sort of not in our patch, we have been informed by Northern that there's an introduction of charges for car parking at a number of stations around the country. I think there's about 9 stations outside of West Yorkshire. But be mindful that 2 of those stations are those which border onto us at Wheaton and Connolly. So we are expecting to work closely with Northern to understand the impacts of those charging measures that have been putting in, including where it may have an impact on our own level of patronage of rail heading going into West Yorkshire from outside West Yorkshire as well. So I'll leave it at that for now, and for the operators to ask any questions, or to ask any questions of the operators, I should say.
Thank you very much. That's a much better way of presenting it. I think 2 things there, big things, is obviously the strikes this week as well. So how can you say how you're operating this week and how you're alleviating any pressures on members of the travelling public? And then also Councillor Hutchinson's point from earlier about the ticket offices and whether you're now fully staffed in the ticket offices, because obviously after you held back vacancies and after the government decided not to close the ticket offices, then we did find there was early closure of ticket offices or unexpected closure of ticket offices across West Yorkshire because you just didn't have the stretch in the staff, and obviously we want to eliminate that now. So some indication on those 2 items. I don't know who wants to go first, Northern or Transpennine.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think just to address the ticket office situation, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that the promise was made for us to start recruiting to fill those vacancies. That recruitment has started. What we're having to do, what you need to be mindful of, is do it in a bit of a phased approach, because we've got so many vacancies that needed that backfill. So we're prioritising the areas that have been hit the hardest, where we haven't got as much cross cover, to allow our training departments the ability to be able to get that training up and running. So those are being actively advertised and interviewed for as we speak, and there'll be more and more coming through as the weeks progress to make sure that we fill all those vacancies. So that's from Northern, that's our commitment that we'll be doing it. So there'll be we'll be following the commitment to keep ticket offices open for the hours that they were scheduled to be open for.
When you'll be finished with that recruitment phase, obviously.
It's going to take place over the next few months, so that we can get them through the training, because our training team is only a finite resource. So we need to, but we've got those training courses planned in now over the next few months, and we'll be just filling those as we go through, based on whatever, whether it's ticket office specific or whether it's ticket office and dispatch, is slightly different sort of training requirements. But we've got plans to have all those courses filled, and we'll be doing that over the next few months. But we have got cross cover in other places, so we've seen a significant improvement already in the ticket office opening, being able to cross cover that as well. So there has been some improvement in that.
I think it just shows, doesn't it, even mooting the point that ticket offices might close has caused a massive disruption across the network, actually, for the travelling public. So I'd like government to be careful about how they go about making announcements and putting pressure on operators to trim their budgets, because it does have long-term consequences. And regarding the strikes, Kerry, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so strikes take place on the 31st of January, so there'll be no Northern services running on Wednesday this week. There's action short of strike action, which is a rest day ban for the full week, which started yesterday and runs to the 6th of February. So we do expect to see more challenges with being able to cover all our services. So for instance, this morning, South East Yorkshire had about 20 services uncovered at the start of day. That's pretty much halved now. But it is something that could fluctuate as the week goes on. So we do expect to see a higher number of cancellations this week, but we're trying to mitigate that where we can. It's that there's no flexibility for drivers to be able to move their hours either as part of the action short of strike action. So it does limit us to what we can do in some scenarios.
Thanks very much. So thank you for the opportunity to give a quick update. So I think there's a couple of areas that have been asked about there. So we'll cover the strike first. So we won't be running any services during the main part of the day. The focus is really on making sure that we get the shutdown and the startup right. So we're presenting the least amount of disruption to customers travelling on the days either side. I think, as we talked about previously at the committee, there's the action short of a strike weeks have been particularly challenging for TP in the past. So what we're seeing at the moment is that with the timetable interventions that we made back in December, we are looking at a much improved level of resilience there. So we're expecting that there will still be around 20 or so cancellations happening each day. To cover for the fact that we still have that training backlog, which we're working really hard to clear at the moment. But we will be in a much better position to where we were in November, when I think the last strike action took place. And then in terms of the ticket offices and closures, so like Northern, we've been working hard in the background to recruit up and start staffing the ticket offices to the hours. So that's all going relatively well. But we've still got a few areas that we'll need to close out in the next couple of months. But you should be seeing much improved opening hours from us. So thanks.
I suppose from our point of view as well, I just want some reassurance that you are absolutely willing to talk to the trade unions, and there's no reluctance on your part to come to the table. Obviously, it's in everybody's interest to get to a good resolution as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're standing by to have those discussions. There's clearly a national aspect to it, which we need to be mindful of. But we're absolutely ready to engage when there's a mandate there to engage around. So thank you.
Any more comments or questions? Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to understand a bit more about Northern's stations as a place policies. Obviously, manned ticket offices and the other services that can be provided from them is part of that. But also more widely, I believe that Northern have decided at fairly short notice to introduce licensing fees for car clubs to use the station car parks, which it's obviously has an impact on the hope to increase or reduce the dependency on private vehicles, and how that fits in with the wider car parking charging strategy, which could be used helpfully if it deters people from by default using private cars to actually get access to the rail network if there are other options open to them. But how it can be done is a kind of coordinated, properly thought through process. So I would like to know more about stations as a place and what we can do to promote that.
So I'll go for Dave Haskins. Dave, do you want to come on that? Because obviously that's, we've discussed this many times before actually, and from my point of view, in that I do see station car parks like a park and ride solution really, to get cars off the road from that point of view. Or is it Helen? Sorry, Helen. Maybe we're looking at Helen.
Thank you. I think we have been looking at stations and through a number of pieces of work around, particularly in the rail strategy, and around how we can work, how we can look at kind of building more into stations through placemaking and bringing that kind of interconnectivity around stations. There's also a piece of work we're currently doing around mobility hubs and around kind of bringing a number of other connected places through that. So looking at how we can integrate through car clubs and through wider kind of active travel and placemaking through there. So we are kind of looking at how we can build station kind of places, if you like, into wider policy.
Thank you, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. David, in his presentation, touched on communication, and I'd just like to mention Network Rail and the Transpennine upgrade, because communications are excellent with Network Rail. They inform us well in advance of any blockades that are taking place and the works they're doing. And I'll repeat it again, I've said it many times. People don't realise that this is the biggest project at present happening in the country, Network Rail upgrade and Transpennine. And touch wood, it's all working very well at the moment, and so congratulations, Network Rail.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. It's nice to hear that positive feedback, and it is absolutely, as you say, a huge investment for the north of England, and one that we've been wanting for a very long time, so it's lovely to see it being realised. Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. So the first one about strikes, which will be a concern to many people, especially those where there is only one operator, where there is only one rail operator. I mean, I've raised this issue before about relations between the companies and the trade unions, and I would put it to you that nobody working for the railways would take the decision lightly to withhold a day's work. I mean, not only is there the impact on passengers, but also it's the loss of a day's salary in the middle of a cost of living crisis, in the middle of winter, and also in order to get to that point, there has to be a democratic ballot within the union. We know there are significant issues with sickness, ongoing sickness, with vacancies, as well as service cuts, which can result from that. So can I put it to you, and also this has been ongoing, this is not something which has just started, so can I put it to you that relations between the train companies and the trade unions are not good enough, and you have a significant responsibility here to members of the public who are paying the consequences of this. And so can I put the challenge to you that you must do better, because this is having a serious impact on the travelling public, and that relationship needs to be improved. It's not good enough at the moment, and it's having a serious impact. So there's a question about the strikes. Also a question related to passenger experience. So I and a number of the other Leeds members on here received an email some time ago from a resident. This particular resident was talking about the 7:53 train from Morley to Leeds, which I think starts in Wigan, and repeated cancellations. However, the points that he was making about the train from Morley could equally apply to other stations as well, not just in Leeds, across West Yorkshire. And what he was saying is repeated cancellations meant that he was getting to work late. He was a young professional, he was getting to work late. The train was the only option for him to get into Leeds. And as a result of arriving late, he was getting into trouble with his employers, who quite understandably expected him to be on time, but this is not his fault. And so when there are these cancellations, there are real life consequences for people who need to get to work, who need to get to hospital appointments, who have onward transport connections. And so from a passenger's perspective, If a passenger is in that situation where their train is cancelled and it's not a one-off, it's a regular occurrence, what would you do? What is that person supposed to do in that situation? That they're at the station, their train, the 7:53 or whatever train it is, has been cancelled. What are they supposed to do in that situation?
Let's go to Northern first.
Would you like me to go in first? You're absolutely right. You know, we don't want to cancel any trains. It's as simple as that. And performance before Christmas was, you know, showing high levels of cancellation. So we were at 7.4%. There are some green shoots. We have enough train crew. Let me be clear. We have the right amount of train crew to be able to deliver the full service. We do, as you referred to, have continual high levels of sickness. Thankfully, as of the 25th of January for this last period, the cancellation rate is over halved. So we are seeing much stronger performance since the start of the year, which is good news. We continue to drive high levels of training. So we've got currently in the East region alone 2,660 outstanding training days. But with the help of us having the rest day work agreement, we've been able to get through, just for the East region, over 200 days a week through using that rest day work agreement to get that training down. So that's our absolute priority, is to make sure we are getting our people through the training and qualified and out doing the jobs that we employ them to do, and to absolutely drive those cancellation numbers down. And I'm not familiar with any correspondence on the train that you mentioned in particular, but you're right. You know, people depend on us to get to work, to get to the, you know, to whether it's be schools, jobs, funerals, shopping. You know, it's all important to those individuals, and we do need to improve.
And then Transfer 9.
Yes, I think in very much the same way, we absolutely recognise the challenges our customers experience, and we've got high levels of cancellation. So I think that the key thing is that we always try to apologise when that does happen, and we do offer sort of at least some forms of compensation when that happens. We've been working really hard, as I said earlier, to clear the training backlog and get ourselves in better shape. We've seen some real improvements since the December timetable change, so we're about 26% better in terms of cancellations than we were before that timetable was introduced. And actually, a lot of the challenges we've had have been much more weather related and other infrastructure issues over the last month or so. So I think the underlying picture for TPE is really improving. So hopefully we can start to, the customers can start to see some real sustained improvement from us over the months to come. Thanks.
I know Councillor Edwards would like to continue this, obviously we're short of time, but can I just ask you to also note seriously his comments around the trade union relations, which obviously does need to improve, otherwise we won't be in this position. So I think it's probably worth perhaps a longer response to Councillor Edwards, perhaps outside this meeting.
Yes, happy to say something briefly, if that's okay. Sorry not to answer that question. So we have been working really hard since the transfer into DOHL back in the spring. So locally, that has seen the relationship with the trade union improve to the extent that we've been able to restore rest day working, which is clearly helping with our performance at the moment. And locally, relationships are improving. I think in respect of the dispute which has created the strikes this week, as I said when I spoke earlier, there's a national mandate in play here. So there is a relatively limited amount that we can do locally in terms of the relationships and so on to affect that. We have to work with within that national mandate as it stands today.
Thank you. I want to move on now to the next paper, really, unless we've got any further burning questions. No. Thank you very much for your attendance. I would like the bus operators to stay for the council. Obviously, the next one is about the bus service improvement plan, so it might be something on there that is of your interest. And it might be a conversation perhaps with Councillor Edwards before you leave rail operators, just to reassure him of your positive action on the items that he raised. So, bus service improvement plan. Helen?
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. There's a couple of things in this paper that we just wanted to work through. First of all, there is an endorsement around the Phase 3 funding, which is the new government funding for BSIP. So we've received, the paper sets out the funding we've already received through the BSIP programme. Government have proposed a further 13.3 million for 24-25. We would like endorsement from Transport Committee of how we spend that funding over the current year. 11 million of that to go towards Mayor's Fares and a further 2.7 million to go onto network, and then a small amount of money to go onto the enhanced safer travel. Our next stage is to access that funding is to update our enhanced partnership. With endorsement from Transport Committee, that would be our update to the enhanced partnership, is that spending profile. So that's building on funding that we're already doing within that enhanced partnership. Did you want to take that first?
Lovely, thank you very much. So obviously for members who are new to this committee, bus service improvement plan is money that West Yorkshire receive from government, and then we decide in Transport Committee and obviously with the Mayor about how that money is spent. About half of it is spent on the Mayor's Fares and the other half is spent on service improvements. And of course, I'm afraid as money is reduced with the bus service operation grant, then this has become to be making up for more core services, which is not what its intention was. But so the more money we can get for more services, the better. And I think we'd all agree on that in the room. Has anybody got any questions or comments on this paper? I've got Councillor Hutchinson, then Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. In Appendix 1, in this section on risks of the BSIP programme, it says, I'd just like to understand why are BSIP projects costing more than originally anticipated? Obviously, there will be the component that's due to inflation, but are there other factors that are leading to increased risk from the cost and not being able to then deliver the other benefits that the programme is intended to?
So the bit you're referring to is the approval that we require from this paper through the change request from the BSIP funding. So if I go over that and then I can explain the risk, would that help? That would probably make it a little easier. So through this paper is also requesting an approval for a further part of the BSIP funding to support the superbus services and the first tranche of new improved bus services for through the funding. The risks bit you require there is essentially setting out increased costs for the services that have come back over and above what we'd allocated in the original budgets. So that's so the number of services we can deliver through the BSIP that we'd originally set out may be lower than we expected, due to operators coming back with higher costs than we had allocated originally.
Inflation is increasing rapidly. I think that is probably the explanation that you're asking for, Councillor Hutchinson, there.
So that is the only factor then?
There's another one in, so I think inflation is a part. There's another one in there where it's been very difficult over a number of years to see where bus patronage is going to go. Is it going to get back to 100% or similar? I think when we've made an assumption of the costs and talking to operators early on in the BSIP programme, there's been an assumption that some of that patronage may come back. We're now getting new figures that might factor in that patronage not being there. So there's some services that we really wanted to do, which were costed as a small contribution, I guess, from the combined authority. But when we've gone back to operators, they've said really that they think the patronage is going to be lower than they thought, so they would like more contribution from the combined authority than previous. So I think that's a part of play as well.
Yeah, but if those gloomy predictions from the operators don't play out and we find patronage increases, is there some flexibility then to actually regain or rebalance it towards the original assumptions?
Yeah, so we have a budget for the network part of BSIP. As we kind of work through and understand where we are with each of those services, we can therefore understand how many more services or length of contracts we can award through that process.
obviously we all are better off if more people use the bus, aren't we, for all sorts of reasons. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can me and Councillor Caroline Firth just thank the committee for, on behalf of Keighley residents who have benefited from the Mayor's Fairs, those deprived communities that we represent. It's very, very important that when we're speaking up on the ground, that they mention that they've benefited through this COVID crisis and, you know, the cost of living crisis with the Mayor's Fairs. Just my questions on the allocated budget on the Keighley Towns network. It says yes, 1.5 million. Do we have a figure that we have left over, and how much is going to be spent next year on the Keighley Towns network? Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it has been tremendous, hasn't it, really? Just the Superbus investment has shown really good results in terms of 21% increase in people using the bus, which is great. And I think the Superbus in Leeds as well. And obviously, we've got some more approvals we've done here on the Halifax Huddersfield, which I hope therefore will show similar results. So the investments we are making on these additional services is really positive, and it's nice to see that. So Helen, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, and I think that's where we can show that we've kind of, when we've done some investment, we've got the output from that. I think the final thing here was just to have the recommendation that the 3.168 million further is released from the programme to deliver the further Superbus services and the additional tranche 1 services. Can I just note one change for those that's in the paper? The service 212 is listed, and that one won't be coming forward as part of this tranche of services. It will be coming forward in a later tranche of services, and that's due to costs and timing of that funding coming back.
Okay, and I think in answer to Councillor Hussain's question, is it not? It's a 3-year programme, isn't it? A funding for the Keighley programme, and I think it may be tapered. But after 3 years, then it has to. Oh, Transdev will know because Transdev will run the service. So we like the Keighley bus service. That's a bit of positive news for you. We like the Keighley service.
I don't say anything else then after that, surely. I'll just keep quiet. But no, thank you for that. I think, yes, it's a 3-year agreement, and the funding tapers after that, and then there's a potential 2-year extension on there. And I think the interesting thing, we were really keen to get Keighley early on in this, because actually quite a lot of communities in Keighley didn't really see much benefit from Mayor's Fairs, because the maximum fare on a lot of the town services was £2, which is why we thought actually going for the £1 town fare there would be something that would have some good impact. And actually on the routes that only benefit from that, we've got 5% growth in the first few months. The 2 routes we've increased in frequency are already up to 20% in there. And also, in response to Councillor Hutchinson's point of view, with the 60 into Leeds, I think we've quoted 28% in that. And that's actually perhaps slightly underselling it, because that refers to the route as a whole, whereas at the moment the benefit is primarily between Shipley and Leeds. And actually coming out of Leeds, we're up to 40% growth compared to where we were before, which has created 1 or 2 capacity problems. Despite us putting on 50% extra resource, we have got some quite busy journeys, which is excellent. So in response to that, we'll be adding in some extra capacity, and we'll be extending the current new trips that only run to Shipley through to Keighley from April, and we'll be doing that within the funding envelope that's already there. So in response to your point, because it is doing better than we expected, that gives us a framework to do more, and hopefully that creates this sort of cycle of benefit, doesn't it, in there, and allows us confidence to invest in more, and hopefully the effects will be witnessed similarly elsewhere as well in West Yorkshire in due course.
Lovely, that's great to hear, and good to hear. That is exactly what this committee wants to see. Of course, we invest in trial routes, see if they work in partnership with yourselves, and then it increases patronage and gets vehicles off the road and leads to more profitable routes, and that is essentially what we're all about here. So this money has given us an opportunity to do that. I'm really glad we're using it to the best advantage. Any more questions or comments on this? We'll move straight to approvals. Okay, well, I'm happy to recommend approvals. Councillor Carlow, can you second those?
Yeah, happy to second it, yeah.
All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that is carried. So moving on now then to item rail strategy update. We can do that briefly, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. So just to brief report here. So this the rail strategy went out to consultation in the summer last year. This looked at the full coverage of the rail strategy and set out to adopt this year, and we are working towards an adoption at the Combined Authority meeting in March on the 14th. What we would like Transport Committee to do here today is to note the outcomes of that consultation and how it is taken forward. It should be noted that the rail strategy will be adopted to our current transport strategy. It will then be transferred over to our new local transport plan when we hopefully move that towards adoption later next year. The main changes in the rail strategy following consultation, which was an overall positive consultation, were really to just update around the rolling stock and decarbonisation to just strengthen kind of some of the content around there. The other update was really the timing of the rail strategy being consulted on and Network North happening in October. We reflected on the consultation for the rail strategy and what Network North was saying, and we essentially used Network North as a hook to sort of set out our kind of still keen for some long distance connectivity and increased service operations. So within that, we set out where we wanted to kind of make sure we were promoting West Yorkshire through Network North and including some key areas within that weren't promoted through Network North, particularly around the T-shaped station for Leeds, improved connectivity in West and South Yorkshire and East and West Midlands, and electrification of the Calder Valley and the Harrogate line, and flagging the Penistone line through that as well. So what we want Transport Committee to do here is endorse the rail strategy and endorse it moving towards adoption in March.
Thank you. And of course, we've seen this as we've gone along in its development, hasn't it? So it shouldn't become a surprise to anybody. Has anybody got any questions or comments on this? Obviously, we've got to recommend it today. I've got Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, it's good to see that the Calder Valley line electrification is flagged up, and that would, there should be a very, very strong business case for that. But it didn't appear in the Network North programme, so I would like us to make sure that that does get emphasised strongly to the government. But also the Castlefields corridor, which would be essential to link the services on the Calder Valley line with the universities, hospitals and Manchester Airport, and it's how the West Yorkshire Rail Strategy actually references scheme projects that would be needed to happen outside the borders of West Yorkshire, and I'm not entirely clear of that.
Yeah, thank you. So our rail strategy focuses on what we want from West Yorkshire and what we want from the rail network within West Yorkshire. But through that process, but also through the LTP process, we will be working with our neighbouring authorities to kind of promote and work to kind of jointly promote kind of other schemes that would help benefit West Yorkshire.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to welcome the results of the consultation that seemed to reveal a consensus around opinion in and around the industry and the public sector and the private sector as well, that more integration with the rest of the public transport network and active travel, decarbonisation being an absolutely key part of the core of any of our strategies, and improving stations and accessibility, which I know is a key priority. I also welcome mention of connectivity between West and South Yorkshire being one of our priorities as a combined authority, and thank you for mentioning the Penistone line. I am going to bring up the Penistone line because I know it's a priority for Kirklees Council, and it is a massively underutilised resource connecting those two parts of the country. So I noticed it was conspicuous by its absence in this report, so I just wanted to bring it up here. Don't forget about the Penistone line.
Fine. And Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And as my colleagues have said, there are many positive points in this report. I wanted to pick up on one of the points here, the importance of improving stations, particularly around accessibility. I mean, one of the things that came up, one of the messages that came out very loudly from the consultation around the government's proposed ticket office closures was around accessibility, and particularly for people with disabilities. And I noticed elsewhere in one of the reports, so there was talk about an accessibility audit at stations. So when we look at the map of rail station accessibility, there are a significant number of stations across the network where which are not fully accessible, and a number which are not step-free. So can I really urge that there's a lot more, that work is done on that, and work is done in partnership with interested organisations, and that is progressed as quickly as possible. And can I also make the point about stations with audible announcements? I know at one of my stations that's been an issue that's been raised with us, and I think it's an issue elsewhere, and I didn't notice it in the report. But particularly where there are cancelled services, delayed services, it's really important that people can hear the announcements, and that's an issue that's been raised by passengers. So if that can be added to this, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Some good feedback there. Helen, would you like to come back on those comments we made?
Thank you, and yes, we'll note that and look to kind of make that update. Thank you, and also again with what was said by Councillor McLaughlin in terms of the priorities. Yeah, and we'll make sure the pencil line is presented in there as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rushaw.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. And it's good to see there's been some bits added, I think, based on feedback with the authorities as well. So I know obviously everyone names their favourite bit, but I think probably understated in its importance of the Air Valleys, the Skipton Cone line. So really pleased that that's been in there. Obviously worked with your officers as well on a meeting with the CELRAP campaign group recently. So we're just pushing the government to release the feasibility study that's been done around that, which allegedly shows a positive case, but they're refusing to take it forward to the next step. Just so thank Leica officers for the work with us in pushing that forward. And it's good to see it in the rail strategy as well, along with, I know it's always hard to be too prescriptive in a strategy because it needs to in some cases kind of reflect things at the time, but just keeping open that potential for new stations in places like Leicester-Dyke, which we think could just add that extra capacity as we have those long-term plans around the interchange and a new station, which I think we all accept now is an even stronger case for a new station in Bradford City Centre than it was before. And if we do a £2 billion upgrade to that area, then a new station at Leicester-Dyke just outside provides a bit of capacity on that line as we're doing that work. So I think we think it'd be good value for money to look at that, and just pleased that it's kind of kept open as an option in the strategy as well. So thank you for that.
Lovely, thank you very much. So with that then, I propose we accept the recommendations in the report, which is to endorse the revised rail strategy, and this will be going forward to combined authority for final approval on the 14th of March. Seconded by Councillor Firth. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much for that. Then finally, just on this agenda, then local transport plan update. Briefly, who's that? Helen?
Yep, this will be brief. Thank you. We, as you know, or as you're aware, we're kind of working through a new local transport plan for West Yorkshire. This is to set what the local transport future plan will look like for across all of West Yorkshire, and the districts are currently also working on their transport strategies at the same time, with the exception of Leeds, because Leeds has one in place. What this paper is setting out is our kind of next phase of work within our local transport plan, for which we are looking towards to doing a kind of an update to our programme, which is a two-stage consultation. So our first stage consultation we are looking to go towards, which we're looking to June, for that to kind of give a strategic kind of outset and vision for our local transport plan, and then to come back towards the end of the year, start of next year, on more detailed policies. So this paper is looking for endorsement from the Transport Committee to allow us to do that process.
It's a two-stage process, isn't it? They're asking for approval for today. Is there any comments about that approach? Andrew, yes.
Firstly, I'd just like to offer support from the operators here on contributing and being part of that element. I'm sure you would agree. I'm just going to talk about coach briefly. So we cover coach as well, and often coach is forgotten, and there's two aspects with coach. One, for small operators in West Yorkshire, there's a huge interdependency between bus and coach. You'll see coach operators running local services and competing for local contracts. And also there's huge economic benefits to be released, realised and heightened through very minimal interventions. So it's actually a CPT national policy position to ask local authorities to include a coach section. So I just wanted to plant that seed and we'll be delighted to work with you on that, if that's okay, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's a good point to pick that up, isn't it, really, so it can be incorporated. Thank you for that suggestion. Any more comments, questions? No? Lovely. Well, in that case, can we accept the recommendations as outlined here? I'm happy to recommend that two-stage approach. Councillor Carlos seconded that. Can I see all those in favour, please show? That is carried. Thank you very much. It only remains me to say thank you very much for coming today, I believe. No more papers, are they, on the... That's lovely. And Melanie Corcoran, talking about South West working, Melanie Corcoran is leaving the Combined Authority to go to South Yorkshire, actually. So we're going to have a bit of a join up there. And she would have been at this meeting, but unfortunately she's able to come today. But she leaves on the 9th of February. So I just wanted to say thank you from this committee for 7 years of work she's put in, obviously delivering at pace a very increasingly large capital programme that we all want to see in our respective places. So thank you very much to Melanie, and we wish her well in South Yorkshire, and hopefully that leads to better West-South working, which we all endorse. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. All the best.